Corporal Jack Edmondson was already bleeding when he charged the second machine gun. He destroyed it anyway. Then he kept moving. April 1941. Tobruk, North Africa. Edmondson was 24 years old, surrounded by the most tactically sophisticated army on Earth. And he did exactly what German doctrine expected no one to do. He ran toward the thing that was supposed to stop him. Tonight, I'm going to show you how an entire Australian battalion did the same thing. Not with courage alone, but with Rommel's own manual in their hands. They found the flaw in his system. They built a trap around him. And they used it to stop 60 panzers cold in one morning. This isn't a story about holding a line. It's a story about thinking faster than the man who rewrote modern warfare. By April 1941, Rommel had done something that wasn't supposed to be possible. In 11 days, the Afrika Korps swept 800 kilometers, nearly 500 miles, across Cyrenaica. Everything the British had spent months winning, gone. He moved faster than his orders permitted, faster than his supply chain could support, faster than Berlin thought wise. OKH told him to consolidate. He advanced anyway. Speed as shock, aggression as armor. That was the Rommel method, and it had worked everywhere he'd used it. Now he needed Tobruk. Without it, his army ran out of fuel before it reached Egypt. That's not an exaggeration. Without Tobruk's harbor, his supply line stretched 1,600 kilometers back to Tripoli, nearly 1,000 miles. Every liter of fuel, every shell, every tin of food trucked overland the entire length of Libya. His panzers were burning supplies faster than that road could replace them. Tobruk solved that problem overnight, which is why he expected it to fall in days. Defending it, roughly 36,000 men under Lieutenant General Leslie Morshead, the backbone, the 9th Australian Division. Morshead's order to his officers, delivered without ceremony: "There'll be no Dunkirk here, no surrender, no retreat." But he wasn't just telling his men to hold a line. He was telling them to make the besiegers feel besieged. Patrol, raid, disrupt. Force Rommel to react to them, not the other way around. Aggressive defense. Not a contradiction, a philosophy. What Rommel didn't know was that the Australians had spent the previous week reading his mail. Not literally, close enough. When the British withdrew, they left behind captured German tactical manuals, diagrams, after-action reports from the French campaign, the complete operational logic of Blitzkrieg, written in enough detail that a careful reader could understand not just what the Afrika Korps did, but what the whole system needed to function. The 217th Battalion's officers read those documents the way you study for an exam you cannot afford to fail. They found one flaw. On the morning of April 14th, they were going to use it. Here's what the manuals told them. Rommel's assault method followed a consistent rhythm. Armor leads, panzers forward, suppressing defensive positions with main gun and machine gun fire. Infantry follows 200 meters behind, roughly 220 yards, using tanks as moving cover. Anti-tank guns leapfrog the flanks. Artillery shifts continuously to suppress counterattacks. The whole system runs on tempo. Keep moving. Keep the enemy reacting. The flaw was that 200-meter gap. The tanks needed their infantry to protect flanks and maintain awareness of the ground around them. The infantry needed the tanks to suppress defenses enough to advance safely. Remove one, and the other became dangerously vulnerable. If you could destroy the infantry before the tanks realized what happened, the entire combined arms system broke apart. Tanks became expensive, blind machines with nobody covering their flanks, and no way to hold whatever ground they took. Don't fight the leading edge. Attack the dependency. That was the entire plan. The 217th spent 3 days repositioning everything based on this. Anti-tank guns moved to positions German doctrine classified as unsuitable. Angles that simply didn't appear in the range tables German tank commanders were using. Minefields laid after the last German reconnaissance pass. In ground, the Germans had already assessed and cleared in their planning. Fighting positions dug in terrain German intelligence had marked as unoccupied. Everything the Germans thought they knew about Australian positions was wrong, because the Australians had read the manual that told them what Germans looked for when they looked. Before the main assault, 40 men from Baker Company crawled out of the perimeter at 0200 hours. New moon. Absolute darkness. They navigated by counting paces and whispering. Target. The German forward supply point. 1,100 meters southwest, just over 1,200 yards. Fuel trucks, ammunition stockpiles. Sentries watching outward toward the fortress they'd be attacking at dawn. The Australians came from behind. Here's why this mattered more than it looks. The German assault depended entirely on those forward supplies being intact. Without them, the Panzers had less margin for extended engagement. Less margin meant less flexibility, and less flexibility meant the assault had to go exactly according to plan, which meant if anything went wrong, the entire assault collapsed. This wasn't a side operation. It was the first layer of the trap. At 0347 hours, grenades went into the fuel trucks. The explosion lit the desert. Ammunition cooked off in chains. Panzer crews stumbled out of bedrolls in the chaos. They found Australians instead. 11 minutes. 2 trucks destroyed. 1 ammunition dump gone. 17 Germans dead. The Australians were back inside the wire by 0430 hours. Rommel attacked at dawn anyway, straight into smoke and craters where his supply point used to be. He had never been stopped. He did not yet believe he could be. He was about to learn something new. April 14th, 0520 hours. 60 Panzers moved on a 3-kilometer front, just under 2 miles, toward the southwestern perimeter. Panzer IIIs and IVs, the best armor Germany had deployed to North Africa. German infantry followed 200 meters behind, roughly 220 yards. Communication already difficult, through dust and engine noise before the first shot was fired. The Panzers crossed the outer wire, the 217th held their fire. I want you to actually feel what that means. 60 tanks crossing your wire, engine vibration through the limestone you're lying on. The sound in your chest before your ears register it. And the order is, wait, don't fire. Let them pass, because the tanks are not the target. Opening fire early would have revealed their positions immediately, triggering German suppression and calling the infantry forward under armored cover. They would lose concealment and timing in the same moment. The entire plan collapsed if they fired too soon. So they waited. The German infantry came through the wire gap at 0541 hours. Every Bren gun, every rifle, every mortar opened simultaneously, from positions German intelligence had marked as empty. At under 150 meters, barely 165 yards. In 2 minutes, the infantry stopped existing as a fighting force. Survivors went to ground, couldn't advance into the fire, couldn't retreat through it, couldn't reach tank commanders ahead of them, who were still moving forward, completely unaware that their infantry support was gone. The Panzers kept moving for 7 more minutes before commanders understood what had happened. 7 minutes, inside a defended perimeter, alone, without infantry, without anyone watching their flanks or telling them what they were driving into. At 0548 hours, the anti-tank guns opened, not from the front, where German commanders were trained to expect and suppress them, but from the flanks. Thinner side armor, under 200 meters, barely 220 yards. The formation fractured. Some tanks pushed deeper, still looking for the breakthrough the plan had promised. Others reversed, straight into the minefield, laid after the last German reconnaissance pass. 2 Panzers hit mines simultaneously. A third through a track trying to maneuver clear. A 4th crew bailed before their vehicle stopped moving, which tells you everything about what it felt like inside that formation at that moment. This is where Edmondson comes back. His section was in a forward position. The German advance had already rolled past. When a machine gun pinned his men down, he didn't wait. He charged it. Open ground, direct fire, destroyed it. Moved to the second position. Took that out too. Still moving, despite wounds that should have ended him long before. He died the following morning. Victoria Cross, 1st Australian VC of the Second World War. What Edmondson did on that ground, running toward the thing designed to stop him, was exactly what the entire battalion had done institutionally for 3 days. Study the system. Find the dependency. Run straight at it before it can adjust. By 0640 hours, the assault was in full withdrawal. 17 Panzers didn't come back. The 217th lost 26 men killed, 64 wounded, 26 men, against 60 tanks. No armor of their own. Sit with that. Because it didn't happen by accident. It happened because 3 days of preparation and one precise insight, attack the dependency, not the leading edge, turned 60 tanks into a problem that 26 dead men solved permanently. The April engagement didn't end the siege. It established a pattern. And patterns, once established, compound. The 213th Battalion built a ground-level intelligence operation over 8 weeks. Hundreds of patrol reports, German positions, rotations, timing, wire gaps, which approach routes fell into shadow at 0200 hours when the moon sat low. They built it because they needed it for something specific. On July 17th, 3 simultaneous raids using everything that intelligence had given them. But here's the key thing to understand before I explain what happened. This only works if you know exactly how the enemy reacts. 3 platoon-strength parties moved through wire gaps they'd spent weeks mapping. Targets placed at the junction between German and Italian sections of the outer line. Chosen deliberately because coordination between those two forces was predictably slow. When trouble hit that seam, response lagged. First party hit a German listening post, silently. No firearms, because a gunshot reveals position, and position was the one thing they couldn't afford to give away. Second party breached Italian wire 400 meters north, just under 440 yards. Third party didn't attack anyone. They waited. Because when contact was reported from 2 positions simultaneously, German doctrine triggered an automatic response. Reserve troops moved from the adjacent quiet sector toward the sound of fighting. Trained. Predictable. Every time. The third party was already positioned across that route. 11 minutes. A full German reserve platoon walked into an ambush, built entirely from understanding how their own training told them to respond to a crisis. Without 8 weeks of patrols building that picture, the ambush position is guesswork. Because they knew the pattern, it was targeting. Australian casualties across all 3 raids, 4 wounded, none killed. But the consequence ran deeper than that night. Those patrol reports had been feeding intelligence upward for weeks. The 213th had identified increased German vehicle movement, fresh wire construction, new posts being built 600 meters forward, just over 650 yards, on the southwestern perimeter. That pattern had one meaning. Another armor push was coming. And it told Morshead's staff exactly where. The Garrison's anti-tank screen was pre-positioned before the attack arrived. When Axis armor pushed in mid-August, the guns were already tracking them. Now here's what makes that significant, and I want you to hold this thought. Rommel had used that exact tactic throughout Cyrenaica, pre-positioning anti-armor resources against a known thrust line, at Machili, at Sollum. It was one of the core tools that made him dangerous. The Garrison watched it, learned it, ran it back against him. The August attack lost 11 tanks. The thrust collapsed. The follow-on exploitation never developed. Rommel was defeated by his own method, executed by men in holes in limestone, who'd spent months learning how he thought. The siege lasted 242 days. Garrison casualties, approximately 3,000 killed and wounded. Axis forces attempting to break the perimeter, more than 8,000. For a siege where the attacker had total encirclement, air superiority, and armor advantage, those numbers represent a complete strategic failure. But here's the number that matters most. Every week Tobruk held was another week Rommel's army couldn't move toward Egypt. His supply lines stayed 1,600 kilometers, nearly 1,000 miles, longer than they needed to be, for 242 straight days. That pressure shaped every subsequent operation in the 1941 Desert Campaign. It bought the British time to reinforce Egypt, rebuild armored strength, and construct the force that would eventually drive Rommel out of North Africa entirely. They held it long enough for someone else to win. That's the significance. Not that they survived. What their survival made possible. Rommel called the defenders those rats. Not contempt, recognition. You call something a rat when it won't stay where you put it, when it keeps appearing where it shouldn't, when it seems to know where you are before you arrive. They knew where he was because they'd read his manual. There's a photograph in the Australian War Memorial. Black and white, grainy. May 1941, a captured Panzer III, repainted, flying a Commonwealth pennant. Australian infantry sitting on the turret. One of them holding a German helmet filled with spent shell casings. None of them are smiling. They look tired. Behind them, dust, smoke, and a landscape that photographs like the surface of the moon. The Germans called Tobruk Festung, fortress, a way of explaining to themselves why it hadn't fallen. The Australians called it something else, a classroom, where they proved that the best doctrine in the world has a counter, if you're willing to study it, find its flaw, and run straight at it before it can adjust. One survivor described it decades later. No drama, no ceremony. We read the manuals, the German ones. Our CO made us. Said if you're going to fight someone, you ought to know how they think. That's the whole story in one sentence. They learned how Rommel thought. Then they thought faster. They held. And because they held, someone else got the time to win. If your family carries a story from the Western Desert, drop it in the comments. We read everyone. If you want more battles where thinking beats firepower, subscribe. We find one of these every week. Next, what happens when Tobruk's discipline meets open desert chaos? Sidi Rezek, November 1941. 160 Panzers against 70 British tanks. No perimeter, no wire. No manual that prepared anyone for what came next. That's next.